Welcome to the Comedy Slab. I make this edition 120. He is Shane O'Connor in the English Midlands, if you will, in the rural part, the posh end, and where they rattle their jewellery. And I'm down in the cheap seats in North Kent, and I am Adrian Lacey, in south east of England. Lovely to have you along. If you're brand new to the show, the formula is thus, which is that each week we take a different comedy, be it TV, radio, internet, however we purloin it. Is that a word? I think it is. And we sort of stick it on the notional virtual slab of marble, prod it a bit, realise I'm prodding Shane, and make my excuses and leave, and then hopefully prod the right thing. My court case comes up next Wednesday. Amongst other things coming up. Anyway, so that is what we are going to do in a little while, and it is a BBC Radio 4 show. Rob Newman, he of Newman and Baddiel, we'll get back to that in much more detail in just a mo. It's the half-full philosophy hour, and I'll tell you which episode in just a sec. First, sadly, not one but two funny people dispatched in the last week, which isn't funny. We've just lost comedy actor, and all-round good egg, Geoffrey Palmer, at the age of 93. Sitcom star. We were just reflecting on the fact that he tended to play a lot of high-ranking officials, either in the army or in the police force, because of a plummy accent. It says as much about British society as about him. And just before we get to Geoffrey in a little more detail, it's also farewell at the much younger age of 67 to John Sessions. Geoffrey Palmer first, what would you think of first in connection with him, Shane?
I think it's probably the one that I always used to say wasn't a comedy, which was billed as a comedy. Was it a Marks and Grant thing?
I think it might be.
Because I know he held them in very high esteem, and Bob Larby, I think he also thought was a great comedy writer. But what was I can't even remember the name of what it's called. Was it As Time Goes By?
As Time Goes By, which I worked on before you slated.
So you were no. I've always said this. I don't mind it per se. I just don't think it was always billed as a comedy, and I never thought it was particularly comedic. I always thought it was nice.
A gentle comedy, but it did have an audience, though. I know it had an audience because I had to rig the microphones for it.
Yeah, I was just
yeah, exactly.
Call the names and addresses.
I had to look down my nose at them. No, I didn't do that at all, but I was high up on a boom at the time, and that's not an illicit substance. Before people start searching for it. Oh, I wouldn't mind getting high on a boom.
They say if you were high on a boom, then you weren't there. You didn't remember it, or something like that. I can't remember.
I can remember the 90s, so I can't have been there.
What was it?
That was when we were recording.
What was it like working on the show then? What was it?
I just remember it as a nice, gentle show. The first thing I would say was it wasn't aimed at you or me, I don't think, at the time. Maybe we're growing into the audience that it was aimed at. But it was, I think it went out on a Sunday. Certainly we recorded on a Sunday, and it just struck me as a nice, gentle tea time comedy. It wasn't meant to be challenging. It wasn't going to change the world necessarily. It wasn't radical. But, who's going to not like the comedy pairing of Dame Judi Dench and Geoffrey Palmer? It was just that sort of long-term couple and the kind of things that long-term couples do.
The weird thing is, the only reason I remember that so vividly, though, now is because it's repeated so often. But I think if you'd have asked me up until I was probably about 40 years old, maybe about 15 years ago, then I would have said Butterflies. He was the dad. He was Nicholas Lyndhurst's dad in Butterflies. I'm pretty certain about that. He was a dentist as well, this time he wasn't a policeman or an army official. But yeah, I remember him very vividly for that one as well. But his first TV appearance, I think it was 1955.
Wow.
Which is pretty wow, isn't it, really, when you think about it? I mean, he's been in all kinds of things. He was in Cold It. He was, you look at his resume, and I know he was 93 and he was still working. But even so, he's just got I mean, it's just like everything you can imagine. Coronation Street, he's been in it, you know what I mean? He's done so many things. He was in Paddington, the movie. And
that's without mentioning his voiceover work, which was very lucrative and omnipresent at one stage.
Yeah.
I think in the particularly maybe mid to late 80s into the 90s.
Well, he was so omnipresent. He was ubiquitous, wasn't he? That was the...
Though his ubiquity was omnipresent at
was
one
it
point.
as well? It was interchangeable.
Maybe it was multi-present. But it certainly wasn't an omni-shambles. He was chosen because he could sound like his jowls, couldn't he? Hangdog. And I don't mean that as an insult, that he traded on that. I'm quite
There's
sure.
a lovely quote on the Internet Movie Database. If there's quotes from the people that they profile, and there's a quote on there. He says, "I'm not miserable. It's just my face," so, which I thought was lovely.
And the opposite of me. I look happier than I am, but I am actually miserable. Yeah. But I am very sad, not only about Mr. Palmer, but also John Sessions. That was a real one of those shock things. Didn't even make 70. And it seems like, I'm still quoting a one-man show I saw him. I had a hot date with a young blonde woman back in the late 80s. And I'm still quoting a lovely, I can't even remember the title of the show. Was it something about Napoleon? Or this was at the Riverside Theatre, where I think the BBC were at one stage back in the 50s. My dad, in fact, I think saw a TV show being made there. But then it became an arts centre. This is Hammersmith area of London on the west side. And it just somewhere, I don't know how he got there, but he got in the phrase, oh you were no poulet de printemps. And I don't know an awful lot of French, but it was just a posh way of saying a spring chicken, which I thought, I still use that. A beautiful line. I confess I don't know whether he wrote it or... Do we know if he was a writer particularly? But certainly he had talented... He worked with talented writers.
I'm not sure in terms of... I mean, he did a lot of acting. He's quite a troubled soul, wasn't he, I think?
Was he? I don't know much about anything sort of off stage.
Yeah, I thought
a typical difficult childhood.
I think he was. I think he was one of the. Yeah, I think he was of that generation that went. I mean, he was born in Ayrshire, wasn't he? Scottish, which not a lot of people knew by.
It's not a good start for anyone. I speak as a part. Oh, that's not what you meant.
No, I was going to say that's tough to start with. All that porridge with salt in it is no good for anybody, is it? So.
Well, exactly. If they'd started putting sugar on it, they might be sweeter.
Yeah, who knows? But yeah.
Whereas you might associate Geoffrey Palmer with As Time Goes By, which we know is your favourite sitcom, you and I might think Stella Street when we think John Sessions, the marvellous Keith Richards.
My gut reaction would be, whose line is it anyway? I think that's that.
Well,
that was when he
sort of made his name in TV land.
That's when he first came to prominence, wasn't it? But yeah, I mean Stella Street and hey Keith, you seen the sell by down these marshmallows?
And in my head, and I tweeted this out, I just picture now, does Mick Jagger carry on with the shop on his own? Does he get someone else in to replace Keith?
It's the best Keith impression I've ever heard. But of course, he did, we were talking about the return of Spitting Image that we slabbed a couple of weeks ago, and he was one of the guys that supplied the voices in the early days for Spitting Image, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was a master of the impressionistic arts. So, farewell both to Geoffrey Palmer and John Sessions. So, will this cheer us up? The show we're going to slab, which is BBC Radio 4's and Rob Newman's half-full philosophy hour. Took me a while to get the joke of the title, or indeed be able to say it in one continuous sentence. Of course, it's a half hour, so it's half full as an hour.
I can imagine you.
So you'll find
you've been doing continuity on Radio 4. I bet you're glad you're not there, aren't you now? And now on Radio 4, it's the Rob Newman Show.
Just cop out. Yes, absolutely. Anyway, I should point out the episode title is
it's the New Forest Festival of Stoic Philosophy.
See, that's why I have a co-presenter, or I'm your co-presenter. Let's not go down that route. Yes, two brains are better than one. So yes, it's about Stoic philosophy. I guess before we go any further, what do you understand by the term Stoicism, and can you pronounce it after you've had a pint?
Stoicism. What do I understand by what the meaning of the word? Do you mean?
Yes, or that type of philosophy, or what it means to be stoical.
Stoic philosophy. When I read the term, when I heard the term, I kind of thought it meant kind of robust philosophy. That was how I read it. Having listened to the program, I don't know whether I couldn't tell you whether that's right or wrong.
I use it to mean that being stoical, I think of as being sort of, ho-hum, shrugging your shoulders, that's how life is. It's not expecting everything to be perfect and making yourself miserable by finding out, shock horror, that it isn't perfect. Right. I'm sure there are specialist philosophers in our highly educated audience who might say I'm missing a trick there, but let's go with that as a sort of rough definition. Is it a real thing then? Is it? I didn't know whether it was. It is a school of philosophy.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yes, although I don't know enough about philosophy to know whether the people he names are all. I don't associate all the names he mentioned with Stoicism, and I think you'd have to go back to ye ancient Greeks. And I'm not talking about Stavros or the bloke who runs EasyJet. I'm going back even further to find the roots of it. But anyway, it's a school of thought, an approach to life. Even him, yes. Aristotle had a lot of bottle.
I mean, the problem I have with philosophy is that I always get the impression that they're kind of they're making it up as they go along.
What, like politicians?
Yeah, do you remember? There was a Fry and Laurie sketch where there's a guy and he's supposed to be a Hollywood magnate. Oh yes, I remember so and so, and he said Stephen Fry's feeding Hugh Laurie the lines. He's going, "Do you remember Fenella Condiwist?" And he's going, "Oh yeah, the Condi. Yeah, God, I remember the Condi. She was fantastic. What about Fenella? Ha 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 ha. Yeah, I remember her. She was a fascinating creature. All the men were fascinating creatures. All these going on about this." And at the end, and he goes, "Do you remember Dick Van Dyke?" And he's going, "You're making that up." And all these names that they kind of throw in, it reminds me of that. It's like you got to try and find out which is the real one and which is the one they've just thrown in.
Well, I don't know that it's fair. I get the joke, but Rob Newman's, I don't think he's demanding us to be philosophy students ourselves. I will say he stretched my grey matter, but in a nice way. That I know. I said, put that back. Good job it's not pink. Anyway, I mean, if there's one thing I note about philosophers, they all seem to be miserable sods. Is that your impression? And I don't mean a John Sessions.
Yeah, they don't seem to be. They don't get any happiness out of their insights, do they?
No.
In fact, quite the reverse, isn't it? A lot of the time, I think. I don't know, but
I guess that's probably where Stoicism comes in. It's as I say, it's not expecting life to be perfect or a bowl of flipping cherries. Anyway. Before I dig in too deeply, do you think it's an appropriate time, having set the scene, for the first of two audio clips?
I think that would be lovely.
I'm sure you would enjoy it. Whether you enjoyed the show as is, I know I'm not allowed to predict your score, but I did set this as the homework last week. We take it in turns, folks, if you're not already aware, on the Comedy Slab, but... There was a little grin of mischievousness, even as I set the homework, because I thought, this is not necessarily what I think of as your natural territory. But I almost set it not to wind you up, but just to push you a little, but just to see if actually you might be pleasantly surprised by it. So I look forward to your headline, which will be your reaction once we've heard this first of two audio clips.
You wait till we get Love Thy Neighbour next week's homework. Go on, carry on.
I can't wait for that. I will hold you to it, indeed. But setting the scene could be interesting because basically we've been introduced Rob is giving. It's effectively it's built around a monologue, but with sketches. So it's not pure monologue. There's a lot of sound effects and certain impersonations by Rob himself.
Yeah, it wasn't full on sketches either, was it? Really, it was.
No, little more like little drawings in the margin. Yeah, if you will. So to set the scene, Rob has mentioned when he was a student living in shared accommodation, he lived with a guy called Stice, who was fine unless he lost something, and then what he would lose as a consequence of that was his temper, big time. Fast forward years, and Stice has calmed down because he's discovered the joys of, yes, Stoic philosophy. And furthermore, he set up the festival of Stoic philosophy. Did we say it was in the New Forest? I think we did.
Yeah, the New Forest Festival of Stoic Philosophy is the title of the episode.
Yeah, I think it's episode 3 if I remember correctly. But anyway, you'll find it on BBC Sounds.
And now on Radio 4, the Rob Newman Show, episode 3.
You're painting me as a coward, sir. Have at you. Anyway, I'll get to this flipping audio clip if it kills me, and it very nearly is. So Rob is setting the scene about these big names of philosophy coming along, all organised by one Stice, and I think Rob can tell the story from there.
I must say that when Stice told me who was on the bill, I was mightily impressed. It was a who's who of the leading philosophers. Now, as I say, this was a few years ago, and some of the attendees, such as Richard Rorty, Hilary Putnam, Mary Midgley and Jacques Derrida, have now passed away, alas. But how did you get all these big names, I asked Stice. The Royal Institute of Philosophy has funded an expensive honorarium. A crystal chalice, engraved with a quote from Seneca, will be awarded to each distinguished philosopher. Each chalice is worth about 40 grand. And I'd like you to take part in the New Forest Festival of Stoic Philosophy. Oh, well, I'd love to present a monograph exploring the extent to which Stoicism leads to quietism and an acceptance of the status quo. Bit of a misunderstanding. I want you to perform in the kids' tent as Captain Chucklehead. I'm not really a children's entertainer, Stice. It's certainly not a clown. It's beneath me as an artist. It's not something I would ever do. 50 quid plus lunch voucher and train fare? Welcome to Captain Chucklehead's Tent of Chuckles!
Was it my imagination or was Stice a Midlander? It was a bit half-hearted the way it kept wandering in and out. It was a bit like an old radio frequency that you couldn't quite get.
He's no John Sessions as an impersonator, but we got the idea, and yes, I thought it was West Midlands. But at least that's reversing the stereotype. You know, if he's into philosophy, he's not playing to a stereotype of the uneducated West Midlands.
Although he was actually portraying him as a psychopathic mug smasher in about 2 minutes previous to that. So
yeah, but he was a reformed psychopathic mug smasher. Now you've ruined the beginning for people going to listen to it. Anyway, without further ado, or Gerard Depardieu, could you give us your hot headline for your reaction?
I can. My headline was, and it came to me in an instant, to be honest with you. My headline is, I think, therefore I am, switching off.
Oh, it was going so well.
It was, wasn't it? Yeah. I really struggled. And you know, I'm fully prepared to concede that this is my density that causes the problem. And
your dentistry.
My dentistry. I should have got those teeth fixed. My density is the thing that caused the problem and not his. But I find we did Rob Newman show before, didn't we?
I was trying to think what we had done of his.
We did.
It's another one-man show on the radio.
Total Eclipse of Descartes, which...
Oh, yes. Oh, there's a recurring theme. I think, therefore, I am Descartes.
Yeah, which we scored 6 out of 10. You gave it 4 and I gave it 2. And I can't help... All I can hear is... Was it Danny Kaye singing, "The king is in the altogether, the altogether, the altogether, he's altogether more naked than the day that he was born." I can't help thinking I'm being had. That it's that kind of comedy that if you think, actually, it's not at all funny, it is like wading through treacle, that you end up being the victim because you're too thick to get it. Do you know what I mean?
Wouldn't that be the thick-tim?
The thick-tim, yeah. I'm in the thick of it.
But you are a bright lad. It does. I didn't feel I was being had. Neither did I feel that I was following everything. Some of the names I had to replay, and even then I wouldn't even know how to spell them to look them up. So and Mary Mungo and Midgley. I mean, surely that's not a real philosopher. Come on, I'm being had there. Surely.
I thought it was Mary Mungo.
I could hear Richard Baker narrate.
I think it always remember to make sure the lift door is shut. That's the only philosophy I remember from that one.
Can't quite remember the tune.
I don't know. I really struggled. I mean, that concentration thing that you talked about then for a second is something that I really, even after 2 listens, I'm still thinking this is just not going in at all. You know what I mean?
Can I just say, we can see each other on Skype, and your head was literally in your hands just then. No.
Do you know? I think what it is with Rob Newman is that I think he's got such a wonderful delivery. I mean, he's very engaging in the way that he talks, and I find his voice quite engaging as well. So you kind of, he's very good at bringing it up and dropping it down, and that kind of light and shade stuff that he does all the while. And he's a good orator. There's no question about that. But it just keeps, whichever way I go out, I come back round full circle to, is it funny? And, I mean, when he did that gag there on the clip you played, and he said, oh no, I want you to play in the children's tent, I almost expected because it was like one of the few and far between gags in the whole thing.
Yeah. And fun enough, or maybe not quite funnily enough. Yeah, it was a bit of an obvious gag as well, but he would say that is the point. He's silly bloke from Watford. Well, I'm disappointed. I can't pretend to be utterly shocked. And I guess if you didn't as you didn't go a bundle on the Descartes. What was the title of the Descartes?
Total Eclipse of Descartes.
I mean, the title still makes me smile, even though I can't remember it from one second to the next. But but that is where he exists. It's because I mean, without totally spoiling the plot, he does end up sending up philosophers as well. So if you actually unpick it, and we'll hear it actually in the second audio clip, so I don't want to say too much about that. But he isn't saying all philosophy is wonderful and you're idiots if you don't know it. He's gently sending it up. It is so gentle, though, because of this fairly gentle delivery, which I have to say I slightly disagree with you on. I felt he could project a bit more. I was just thinking, if I was in a car, because I have a cheap car, it's got a noisy engine. If I was on the motorway, I'd be thinking, come on, Rob, speak up a bit. You can turn up the radio, but because he's not delivering much, there's not much to turn up.
I thought
if you turn up a whisper, it doesn't become a shout.
I thought that was a deliberate ploy. I thought that was like, isn't that, what's that psychological, I don't know why people do it, I can't remember why, but if you talk quietly, it draws
you
people in. And I kind of felt that was what he was trying to do, so that maybe, because if you did his kind of material at full throttle, I'll tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, Ben Elton style, it wouldn't work, would it? I mean, it would just be...
No, that is true. No, I'm not talking about that much. If that's 11, and he was at 3, I could have done with 5 to 6. Which, funny enough, was the time it was broadcast.
5 to 6, yeah. And disappointed is right. I mean, that I kind of, hugely disappointed, because I thought when it first started, and he was talking about how argument now is something that we can't have without it degenerating into something much more toxic. I think I forget how he described, but he said, "Why have we become so tin-eared?" And the fact that we find it difficult to hear somebody else's point of view now. And I thought, this is really on the money. Actually, this is something that I'd really would want to hear comedy about. This has got promise. And it kind of just turned off that path and went somewhere else, really. And the somewhere else it went. And I put in my notes that, because I said to you, I find the BBC Sounds website I find completely impenetrable and unnavigable.
Do you mean Do you mean the app rather than the website?
No, I use it on the website. I go on the web, and the whole thing really. It kind of just tries to. I don't want my horizons broadened. I want to find what I want to find.
You want them now?
Yeah. Well, no, I want to find what. It's no good like walking into B&Q and going, "Have you got any shovels?" And say, "You don't want shovels. You want paint." And they're like, "No, I'm going to dig a hole. I'm going to dig a hole with a tin of paint." Well, you could tip all the paint out and then dig the hole. And it's that kind of thing. And I found his comedy to be it felt exactly the same. I kind of felt like I was, on the outside of the glass, looking in, steaming up the windows.
But I wonder whether you did a little bit of that yourself, that you distanced yourself from it, in the sense that, did you really, well, I suppose you've said that you gave it 2 listens and then you're still struggling.
It's after the 3rd or 4th time, you kind of think, what did he say? And I've stopped it quite a few times and thought, what did he say there? And then kind of went back to it and thought, what does that mean? And when you've got to, people will work a little bit for your comedy, but I think if your writing or your comedy is that difficult to understand that people, and I say, I'm fully prepared that it might be the Radio 4 audience is much more capable of taking this on board and drive a motor vehicle as well. I don't think I could do the same. If I'd have been in the car, I think I'd have had to pull over and had a cry and a lay-by.
Well, good job you weren't driving as you listened.
Because I could have phoned the AA and say, I'm having a breakdown, couldn't I? So...
Hey!
I mean, that's what I wanted.
When they arrive,
some gags in there. That's
Well, he's kind of eschewed gags, hasn't he? Let's quickly recap his career, because in terms of fame, it came through the Mary Whitehouse experience, which was Radio 1 before it became a TV show, which, again, I have to name drop that I did work on all of 1 episode. I didn't work directly with him, and all I can remember is a Steve Punt line, which was it was a running gag about parents saying it has a good beat.
Right.
But they were huge at the time. They was huge as that fan that used to go around on the TV. Part of the design was this huge fan with dramatic lighting. But I remember that more than the gags, actually. But the thing was, he was the heartthrob, wasn't he? I just seen a photo online when he was a mop top. Well, more than a mop top. You could have made a couple of mops out of his very long hair in the early 90s. And he was draping it in this publicity shot. He was draping it over David Baddiel, his then comedy partner.
And this is the thing I find hard. I don't know what happened to him, because... this is the guy, I found a clip of him on YouTube. This is the man who was doing jokes about onanism and his mother catching him on the Mary Whitehouse experience. And I kind of think, who is this guy now then? Because, I mean, I know we all kind of change, you change your material or whatever as time goes by, but and I can't imagine him singing with the Lightning Seeds, the Three Lions, and getting involved in that. I can't imagine that man that we see now, and I know he's grown up and everything, but I just can't. And it's almost like, I want to use the word pretentious. Is that bad of me?
Well, if that's what you feel, you've got to say what you feel. And let's face it, you've never asked my opinion before as to whether you can express your opinion.
No.
And nor should you have to.
But it's not that. It's more, is that fair, do you think, or do you get any glimpse of that?
There's even a joke about pretentiousness in there. I don't want to spoil it because I'd like people to listen to the whole show. And as ever, a sophisticated audience will make their own minds up. We can't tell them, nor should we, what to think of something. And we're demonstrating again, we don't always agree. In fact, we don't often agree on comedies, but that's the fun of it. And we don't deliberately go out.
But we both love it as well, don't we? Both love comedy, but we like different types of comedy. And I mean, sometimes I think though, you'll say to me, "Oh, try this," and I can think of, well, The Pin is the one we were talking about quite recently. I didn't even know they existed, and you plonk that on the table, and I was like, wow, this is incredible. So it does work sometimes, doesn't it? There is a crossover.
Oh yeah, And we've agreed on Alan Partridge a number of times. Both better stuff, his Oast House stuff, and the most recent TV stuff, which we
both
agreed eventually.
Yeah, we both didn't like as much as the other stuff. Yeah, it does work. But yeah, I just wonder whether you think that's completely unfair, or what your reaction is to that, really. But I kind of there seems to be a pretend. It's almost like, look at me. I'm a highbrow comedian now. It's like the other guy that you like, Stuart Lee.
Mm. I love him.
Yeah, but I kind of, there's a pretension there. It's like you don't think Stuart Lee's funny. There's a real venom amongst his fan base that if you don't like him, if you don't think he's all that there's something wrong with you. You're a bit of a weirdo and a freak, and you kind of think, I don't know. It's a strange thing.
Well, I am part of Stuart Lee's fan base, so you including me on that massive generalisation.
You're the worst. You're the cheerleader.
I don't... No, the point is Stuart Lee looks down on his audience, but that's the flipping joke. I was watching a wonderful video. I was just slight digression, because I did want to mention Stuart Lee, because there is definitely a parallel there. But there's a nice little, I was going to say mini documentary on YouTube, but actually it's about 26 minutes long. And if you search Stuart Lee, I think it's called something like The Problem is the Audience. And that just makes me laugh, because if you know Stuart Lee's act, that is how he acts, that you are the problem, or some of you. He always likes to divide the audience into two tribes, which are at war in Frankie Goes to Hollywood style, and sure enough, he does sniff at some of them, but that is the joke, and it's a performance. But there's definitely a parallel. Coming back to your point a couple of minutes ago about Robert Newman, doing the Three Lions all those years ago. He has grown up. He is a different guy. I don't think he's sniffy about looking back at himself or his audience then. I think it's just an evolution. It's like a snake shedding one of its layers of skin. And it just moves on, and he wriggles in the grass, and he does different things. And
it's like a snake shedding his skin only to reveal a hippopotamus.
Fine, he's a shapeshifter. Try saying that after a few purples. Getting it right.
If he is, he needs to go to the doctor. That's not normal, is it? You shouldn't be shapeshifting. No.
Well, he might wriggle on the on the table. He might be wriggling on the slab now. Perhaps he is.
I don't. I mean, the subject doesn't help as well, does it? Because, as I say, philosophy is one of those things where I personally, I think, to fully get a lot of the gags and the jokes, or not gags, there's not really gags in there, but the jokes and the point to it all, you have to be, I would say, reasonably learned about philosophy. And if you're not, you're a bit stuck, aren't you, really?
It helps to know a little bit, but some of it I think is a bit fictitious, like saying he's definitely stretching a point, and there are jokes in there that when we use the word gag, if you're thinking something that Jimmy Tarbuck might do on Live at the Palladium, you will be sadly disappointed. But there are jokes. Like one joke does just finish the point.
Sorry, I was going to say
I'm busy disagreeing with you before you disagree with me.
My late father,
if I may be allowed to finish my point,
my late dad used to say,
which is
stop interrupting me while I'm.
Just shout me down.
Stop talking while I'm interrupting you.
Feel free. What were you saying about the level of debate getting toxic?
Yeah, go on, fish face. Sorry, no. Go on.
It's Mr. Fish Face for you. I was going to say, I'm sure this is a joke. I don't know enough about philosophy to be completely sure, but I think he has exaggerated the fact that French philosophers like paradox. He's making a point, and he sows a seed, and there is a traditional through line of gags. He sets the scene up, sets the gag up early in the show, and there is a classic comedy callback. It just happens to be a classic comedy callback about philosophy. That's the only difference. The mechanics under the bonnet, I would argue, are pretty much the same.
But don't you think that is that kind of bears out the point that I'm making is that you think that's what it is, but you're not quite sure because you don't know that much about philosophy, so you can't really tell what the fake is and what the and then so it doesn't work then, does it? But you're saying about it's not like musical gags. It is. That's the point. When he does do gags. What was the one we mentioned earlier on? We were saying about the gag that he did.
Oh, the Chuckles. I was going to say Johnny Chuckles, which is a genuine children's act I saw once.
There was that gag, and then he was doing one about the hand slap game, and then it turned out he was playing it with one of the teachers or something. And I thought
it was a dinner lady,
and I thought,
well, that was a classic joke.
That's so old, though, isn't it? That's the one about they used to call me names at school, and the teacher shouldn't have been like that. It was just.
But what's wrong? You're sort of complaining that there weren't enough old school gags. Then he gives you an old school gag, and you're complaining.
No, I'm saying that the dressing is all pretension, and then when you get a gag, it's like musical. It's like.
I think he's saying, I can still do it, can't I? If I want to, I can still pull a gag out of the bag. The bag gag.
Go on.
Clip
us up, baby.
Anyway, yes, I'll clip you up. Clip you around the ear if you carry on like this. You're not too big for that. Right, I give names to these clips in the vain hope that I will remember when we get to the show from an hour before. It should be days before when I've done the clip. What I've put in the audio clip. This one, it's not often I've read out a clip called "Effluent Sucker," but that's what I've called this clip, and it's not rhyming slang. To give it its full title, this is clip number 2, "Effluent Sucker to Clear Flood," which this is where he really has a dig at philosophy, or I would say pretentious philosophers. He literally covers them on the radio in something unspeakable and of a brown hue. And basically he's been asked by Jack Derrida, who is not a stand-up act, but is a genuine philosopher, but played by Rob Newman, not in a genuine way. He's been asked to clear up a flood, which threatens to be a bit of a quagmire for people to walk into when they've left a tent. And so essentially he's getting a machine which normally would clear the contents of the portaloos to use to suck up rainwater, if you will, with hilarious consequences, I would argue.
I hopped off the truck and uncoiled the long vacuum tube. Resting the weight of this giant proboscis on my shoulder, I staggered to the entrance of the Seneca Big Top tent. My plan was to put the mouth of the tube into the puddle, then go back to the truck to operate the controls. But the tube wouldn't stay upright in the puddle, so I called back, "Derrida, please can you press the button that says intake?" There are 2 buttons. One button says intake and one says discharge. Yes, press the one that says intake. But I always say, the only way we ever really intake is when we discharge. What? Discharge is the only true intake. What? No, Derrida, no! There are actually no smells at all out there in the world, which is in fact odorless. To my horror, I fine-sprayed Claudio Yuri Hunmanby and his audience with the contents of 5 hours of festival Portaloo. Turn it off, Derrida!
Do you think there's a reason they didn't do it in front of a studio audience?
For that very scene?
Well, the whole thing, I really struggle with it. I kind of, at 7 minutes in, I was starting to think, what I've actually bought a ticket for here, I'm not really quite sure what it is. And by 9 minutes, if we hadn't had to sit and listen to it, I wouldn't have listened to any more. I would have gone away.
Can you, at any level, and I think I know the answer to this, credit it with at least being creative and an interesting sound design? Anything you can say like that?
Yeah. I mean, I was going to ask you about the sound because there was very. It was at one point. I was listening to it at one point with one headphone on because I was listening with headphones on when I do this, so I can do notes and stuff, and I'm sat at the computer. And I don't want to wake the kids, so I'm listening with but I've only got one headphone on, and because of the stereo spread on it, I could only hear what. Now I know you love. I mean, in fact, we do this podcast with a stereo spread, and I hate it. It drives me nuts. I can't bear it. But it's something you like, and I think you.
Oh, I didn't realise you'd been indulging me. All
Yeah,
these
yeah. I mean,
shows.
you're kind to me, so I think, well, let him if that's what he likes. Yeah. But personally, I'm not a fan of it, and so because I got the one headphone on the top of my head like that, and not on my ear, I thought, what's going on there as well? So yeah,
you're literally missing half.
Yeah,
of it. And you don't know the.
I'm trying to listen to the kids' monitors, you see, as well at the same time because they were in bed. So I'm sort of so that was a bit of a problem for me. But yeah, I mean, it was. Right. I felt like he wasn't fully committed to it, like to anything. He was doing conversations with, as you heard there, with Jack Derrida, and I wasn't quite sure which voice he was doing when he was talking, and it was kind of wandering in and out, and I didn't feel there was a commitment there to. And like the sound design, I didn't feel there was a full commitment to it. It felt, I don't know, half committed, half done.
Really, I'm surprised to hear that. But then I think that's because you're wearing half a headphone.
I've only heard half of it.
I should just say it's made by Naked Productions. I don't know whether they actually do that because it's radio. You can't really tell if they follow through on that as taking their branding very seriously. Do you know anything about that? Have you gone to Company's House?
It doesn't say whether they wear clothes or not at Company's House. There is, I don't know. You know what the revenue are like these days? They know everything about everybody, don't they?
Well, maybe they do.
No, I didn't.
Do we know who's behind it?
To be honest with you, I would. That was one of the things, but I was so mentally exhausted.
You didn't have any grey matter left.
I had no energy left to actually type in the word companieshouse.com.
Okay, well, before you fall asleep, can I get you at least to give it a mark out of 5 as we do each of these shows?
I'm going to give it a 1.5.
So even less than Total Eclipse of Descartes.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I just, honestly, I really struggled with it. But like I say, I'm fully prepared to accept that it could be me that's the problem. If somebody said to me, would you recommend it? And I'd say, well, personally, no. But I think you should give it a try because it might work for you, and I could fully understand the circumstances in which it would work for other people, but it just wasn't for me, Adrian.
Okie dokie. Well, I'm going to give it. I've only just thought of this, so spur of the moment. I'll err on the side of generosity. I'll go with 4 because I do think it's very creative work. I don't need to add to anything else I've said, but each to their own. Chacun à son goût, as some pretentious French philosopher, pretentious moi, would say. So what are you going to do to me next week? Bless this house or love thy neighbour, did you say?
Yeah, love thy neighbour. No, not this week. I thought, do you know what?
Love thy house.
Love thy house. Harking back to the start of the show, we were talking about we'd lost Jeffrey Palmer and John Sessions. I thought, why the hell not do Stella Street?
Oh,
because it was groundbreaking in so many ways. I mean, I was watching the first episode the other day because I've got it in my private collection, and I was watching the first episode the other day when the news hit, and I looked at it, and it almost looked like a home movie. It was that low tech, and I thought, this is there's so much to talk about here. I think if once we start to pull it apart and have a look at it, I think it'd be fascinating. But I've gone actually for series 3. And each episode is 8 minutes, believe it or not, around about 8 minutes long.
God, it's cheeky,
isn't
it?
And it's like,
and that was long before the YouTube age.
Exactly. I'm surprised he hasn't had a bit of a cult re-emergence, but maybe there's time yet. Who knows? So I thought, well, I'll choose 2 episodes because they're only 8 minutes long, and we're still only making a quarter of an hour. But episodes 1 and 2 of series 3. Which are appropriately entitled Stella Street, and episode 2 is called Roger's Burning.
So on Twitter we are at Comedy Slab. Sadly, recently, as I was sort of touching on it, it has been at the RIP end of the tweets, but it's still an important service I feel we provide. But there are happier things, of course, and links to stuff we think you'll enjoy. So at Comedy Slab there. Also at Comedy Slab is the handle for our Facebook page. We'd love you to like that, the latter, and also to follow us on Twitter. It'd be fantastic. and personal recommendations to friends, family, whomever, people you meet over Zoom. However you get the message out, that's really appreciated. And lastly, if you could give us a nice big starry thumbs up on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, a rating there. It does make the difference. It helps the profile of the show and it helps us to be able to make more shows for you and put more into them.
I do more news of this next week, but just to say, you might want to go and do your own investigation. If you like the Comedy Slab and you're thinking, is there a better way to get it on my phone or my listening device or whatever, Spreaker are launching a new app which should make it easier to get the Comedy Slab to your desired doofer, whatever it is that you use. So I'll give you more details about that, and I think we might tweet it out as well, how they're doing it. I know a lot of people listen on Spotify, don't they? Because you can get Spotify on your phone, and it's quite easy. But there's going to be a new app as well, so which should make it easier to get the Comedy Slab. So lots of different ways that you can get it as well.
Okay, well, I think, just for saying that, I think you're a right old effluent sucker, if I may say so, and you're not my preferred doofer.